elements of Sir Andy's report. The summary, provided as evidence to the Safety Advisory Group ahead of their crucial meeting on the 24th of October, was inaccurate. Claims including the number of police officers deployed, links between fans and the Israeli Defence Forces, the targeting of Muslim communities, the mass tearing down of Palestinian flags, attacks on police officers and on taxi drivers were all either exaggerated or simply untrue. In his report, Sir Andy is clear that the validation of intelligence conducted by the force was a cause of significant concern, that record-keeping within the force was poor, and he was especially concerned about the handling of sensitive information that should never have been shared without redaction. Sir Andy also points to a series of public statements from West Midlands Police that we now know to have been misleading. He shows that the police overstated the threat posed by the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, while understating the risk that was posed to the Israeli fans if they travelled to the area. Misleading communications also extend to the words of the Chief Constable himself at his appearance in front of the Home Affairs Select Committee, when he claimed that AI tools were not used to prepare intelligence reports, a claim since refuted by one of his own officers who blames incorrect evidence on, and I quote, an AI hallucination. I know better than most that West Midlands police officers do their duty bravely day in and day out. Sir Andy's report does not argue that the entire force is failing. But what is clear from this report is that on an issue of huge significance to the Jewish community in this country and to us all, we have witnessed a failure of leadership that has harmed the reputation and eroded public confidence in West Midlands Police and policing more broadly. Faced by a game of such importance, the Chief Constable of the force, Craig Guilford, should have ensured more professional and thorough work was done. As Sir Andy himself says, the shortcomings detailed in his report are, and I quote, symptomatic of a force not applying this necessary strategic oversight and not paying enough attention to important matters of detail, including at the most senior levels. The ultimate responsibility for the force's failure to discharge its duties on a matter of such national importance rests with the Chief Constable. And it is for that reason that I must declare today that the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police no longer has my confidence. It has been, as I understand it, over 20 years since a Home Secretary last made such a statement. But on the evidence provided by Sir Andy Cook, the Chief Inspector of Policing, that is now the case. Until 2011, the Home Secretary had the authority to dismiss a Chief Constable, a power that was removed by the last Conservative government. Today, it is only Police and Crime Commissioners who hold this power, and so the Chief Constable's future rests with the local Police and Crime Commissioner and not with me. But I am sure that Simon Foster will now follow all due process as he considers that question for himself. I do, however, believe this illustrates that Home Secretaries should, in future, have this power restored to them. When a Chief Constable is responsible for a damaging failure of leadership, the public rightly expect the Home Secretary to act, and I intend to restore their ability to do so. I can announce today that this government will soon reintroduce the Home Secretary's power to dismiss Chief Constables in light of significant or persistent failings, and that this will be part of the government's upcoming white paper on wider police reform, with legislation to follow. I do not expect this power to be used often, but I think it must be available at those rare moments when it is warranted. Madam Deputy Speaker, Sir Andy Cook's report is devastating. It catalogues failures that did not just affect the travelling fans, they let down our entire Jewish community in the West Midlands and across the country. I speak today not just as Home Secretary, but also as a Member of Parliament for a Birmingham constituency. In his report, Sir Andy says he believes the police acted in an attempt to avoid long-term damage to local community relations. If that is the case, what a grossly misguided effort it was. Peaceful, harmonious communities rely on a police service that, above all else, pursues the truth. In a world in which misinformation flows freely and dangerously, the police, in this case, added further misinformation into our public debate, when they could and should have provided the truth that could have allayed fears. In doing so, West Midlands Police did not support community relations. Instead, they inadvertently made things worse. This must serve as a lesson to police forces across the country, a reminder that they are called to their profession to serve truth and the law, to police our streets without fear or favour, and that community trust and cohesion depends upon them doing that above all else. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shabana Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a shameful episode. West Midlands Police had evidence that Islamist extremists based in Birmingham planned to attack Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. Let's call that what it is. It is vicious anti-Semitism. And we cannot allow violent Islamists to impose their will on our country. Yet that is exactly what West Midlands Police, through weakness and through fear, allowed to happen. They should instead have confronted the Islamist extremists. In fact, they should have investigated the extremists for inciting racial hatred, as Jonathan Hall KC said only yesterday. But instead, they capitulated to the Islamist mob by banning the Maccabi fans. But it gets worse. The West Midlands Police then tried to hide what they had done. They fabricated a claim that it was the Maccabi fans who were the dangerous ones. They claimed a previous game in Amsterdam had led to violence by the Maccabi fans. This claim was a pack of lies from start to finish. The Mayor of Amsterdam and Dutch police have now confirmed the West Midlands Police simply made the whole thing up. The Chief Constable must be fired. The Home Secretary claimed a moment ago that she now has no powers to dismiss the Chief Constable. But she failed to mention to the House Section 40 of the Police Act 1996, which remains in force today. Under that, she as Home Secretary has the power to direct the Police and Crime Commissioner to do things, including dismissing the Chief Constable where, and I quote from Section 60 subsection 1, any part of the force is failing to act in an effective manner. That test is quite clearly met. Part of the force, the Chief Constable, is indeed failing to act in an effective manner by the Home Secretary's own analysis. If she's unfamiliar with this piece of legislation, I've got a copy of it here. The Home Secretary must today use her Section 40 powers to go through the process to direct the Police and Crime Commissioner Simon Foster to dismiss Craig Guildford. She must stop pretending to have no power and actually act. And now we come to the role of the Home Secretary herself in this scandal. In a briefing to the BBC on the 17th of October, a source close to the Home Secretary, which we all know means her special advisor acting with her authority, said the Home Secretary first knew about the possibility of a ban the previous evening, the 16th of October. We now know that is untrue. From evidence given to the Home Affairs Select Committee last week and by the Home Secretary's own admission just now, we now know Chief Constable Guildford personally briefed the Home Secretary on the 8th of October that it was likely away fans would be banned, and that was the police's recommendation. So will the Home Secretary now apologise for allowing her advisor to give the BBC untrue information on the 17th of October? And the Home Secretary herself must now answer this. She knew on October the 8th that it was likely away fans would be banned over a week before the final decision was taken on October the 16th. Yet it appears, in those critical 8 days, she did nothing to investigate further or to try and stop it from happening. The Chief Constable, in his evidence to the Home Affairs Committee last week, said that when he briefed the Home Secretary on October the 8th about the likelihood of the ban, she merely noted, that was his word, she merely noted what he had said, not asking further questions or showing curiosity in what she was being told. She did not convene personally any meetings attended by her in the following 8 days or take any personal steps to clarify the situation. She expressed concerns and took action only after the decision became public on October the the 16th, by when it was too late. She was asleep at the wheel at the critical time. Given the disgraceful events that followed, does the Home Secretary now accept that she was wrong to personally ask no questions? Officials may have asked questions, but she didn't personally ask any between October the 8th and October the 16th. Does she accept it was wrong to stand by and do nothing during those critical 8 days? And by the time she did take action after the 16th, it was too late. And by standing by during those critical 8 days, she allowed the ban to happen and let the Islamists win. Will the Home Secretary apologise to the House for that inexcusable inaction during those 8 critical days? And will she also commit to exercising her Section 40 powers to direct the Police and Crime Commissioner to dismiss the Chief Constable?
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me just first say to the Shadow Home Secretary, I have a long and very personal experience of standing up to extremists in Birmingham, not least in the last general election campaign. I think my track record speaks for itself, and I am a woman who knows of what she speaks. Unlike clearly him, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Home Secretary appears to be unfamiliar with the law or indeed Sir Andy's findings in his report. So let me remind him of a few things. Firstly, it was the Conservative government that removed the Home Secretary's direct power to remove a Chief Constable. It used to be a power contained within Section 42 of the Police Act 1996. That was repealed by the Conservatives in their 2011 Police and Social Responsibility Act, which explicitly removed the power. And I will quote from the explanatory notes of that Act, and I do believe that the Honourable Member for West Suffolk is very aware of what is in these explanatory notes, as I suspect he drafted them and approved them when he advised the former Home Secretary Baroness May. Those explanatory notes say the Secretary of State does not have power to direct a police and crime commissioner to suspend or remove a chief constable. That is the law passed by the previous Conservative government themselves. And as he should well know, if he made himself familiar with how the law is to be interpreted and to be implemented, he would know that Section 40 of the Police Act, which remains in force in the 2011 Act, cannot be read in isolation. When these matters would be litigated before a court would be very aware of the direct powers removed by the repeal of Section 42. You cannot read the two things in isolation, and if he paid any attention to the detail, he would know that, and he would know that the Home Secretary does not have the power he claims that I do. Secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would suggest that he and other honourable members, for their own interest, do actually pay attention to what Sir Andy has written in his report of today. At page 11, he deals with what the Chief Constable has suggested was the reading of the meeting that took place on the 8th of October. Let me just give a bit of context to the House. That is a meeting of police chiefs that I called myself following the attack in Manchester on the 2nd of October. I had already announced that I was going to look at police protest powers, and I had asked the most senior chief constables in the land, the National Police Chiefs Council, the College of Policing, and indeed Sir Andy Cook himself to attend a meeting with me. Towards the end of that meeting, we did some horizon scanning of other difficult decisions that were coming up that might have public order consequences, and this was one such matter. It was mentioned briefly by the Chief Constable, and his recollection of that is absolutely untrue. He did not say to me, or indeed anybody else in that room, that West Midlands Police had already made the decision to reduce the allocation of tickets to Maccabi Tel Aviv fans to 0, but that it was ultimately a decision for the SAG when it next met. That is absolutely categorically untrue. And I would say, given the seniority of everybody who was in the room that heard what was in fact said, if this was the case, it would have elicited a reaction, not just from me and my officials, but from many of the other senior policing officials who were present in that room. What was made clear to me is that the ban was a possibility, but it was one of a number of options that were being considered. And as late as the 15th of October, the football policing unit made clear to Home Office officials and the policing minister that all options were still on the table. And the next thing we or anybody else knew about it was when the decision was taken itself on the 16th of October. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it is important that all members stick to the facts. in this matter, as Sir Andy has made clear in his factual findings in his report. There will be those who wish to play politics with this matter, but I'm afraid that does not meet the test of evidence as set out in the report. And I would recommend to the Shadow Home Secretary actually pay some attention to the detail on this matter.
Valerie Vaz.
Could the Home Secretary say, is she able to say, who the most senior police officer reviewed all the evidence, AI or otherwise, and signed off the decision?
Well, ultimately, the final decisions in this matter, in terms of the West Mids Police recommendation to this Safety Advisory Group, was the Chief Constable himself.
Lib Dem spokesperson Will Forster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The recommendation by West Midlands Police to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans was clearly an incredibly serious mistake. That has been shown and evidenced by Sir Andy Cook's damning report. The way they made the decision, not just the decision, the fact that they covered up their misleading statements, it is absolutely damning. These latest examples, after multiple denials that artificial intelligence was not used into coming to their decision, beggars belief, and risks seriously undermining public trust in the police force, not only in West Midlands, but in the whole country. The Chief Constable of West Midlands does not have the Home Secretary's confidence. He doesn't have mine, and I assume he doesn't have most of the House. He needs to consider his position and go now. I'm pleased the Home Secretary did go quite unprecedented levels to say he should go, and I'm pleased that she's spoken to the House first. Will she later today be meeting with the the Police and Crime Commissioner to call for the Chief Constable to go? Madam Deputy Speaker, we need the Independent Office for Police Conduct to investigate what has gone on in West Midlands Police. Will the Home Secretary ensure that takes place? We have already seen delays to the Hillsborough Law and its duty of candour, including delays just this week. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that this incident shows the need for the Hillsborough Law to come off the statute book as soon as possible? And finally, we need urgent transparency and clarity on the use of AI by police forces. Does the Home Secretary agree with that, and what plans has she got to ensure guidance is given to police forces?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me thank the Lib Dem spokesperson for his remarks. Let me just say at the outset, I have, as a matter of courtesy, informed the Police and Crime Commissioner in advance of making the statement that I will be saying I do not have confidence in the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, but I have also reiterated and made very clear that the process, any statutory process and any decision as to whether the statutory process for further action against the Chief Constable is a matter for the Police and Crime Commissioner himself. He must consider that on his own terms, and I'm sure he will be making his own statement once he's had a chance to absorb the findings of Sir Andy's report. And given that there could be a statutory process, I will not be commenting on what may or may not be happening going forward in order to respect the independence and integrity of any future decisions if they are in fact made. On the IOPC, let me just say to him, I do expect that the Police and Crime Commissioner will consider his position on this matter and approach the IOPC if he deems it necessary, but that is a judgment for him. I also expect the IOPC to consider whether these findings mean that they should use their own power of initiative to conduct an investigation. He will note that they are, of course, independent, and it would be improper for me to seek to direct them in any way, but they do have those powers. I believe they've already indicated they will consider the position again once they've had a chance to absorb the findings of Sir Andy's report. I agree with him. This case proves why we need a duty of candour on all public officials, and I look forward to the Hillsborough Law becoming an Act of Parliament at the earliest opportunity. And just to say, on the use of artificial intelligence by police forces, I will be returning to these matters when I publish and come to the House to make a statement on the Policing Reform White Paper. I think it's important because AI is an incredibly powerful tool which can and should be used by our police forces, but regulating it to make sure it's always accurate is something that is of legitimate concern to us all, and I'll be saying more about that in due course.
Dr. Peter Prinsloo.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement. It is disappointing, but perhaps unsurprising, that some of the evidence presented to the Select Committee was an AI hallucination. But as I look to the back of the opposite row, does the Secretary of State share my suspicions that there was indeed political interference with the work of the Birmingham Safety Advisory Group? And what will happen if this turns out to be the case?
Secretary.
Well, look, having commissioned Sir Andy to investigate these matters, I think it's important that we reflect on his findings, and he did find that there was no evidence that police officers were motivated either by anti-Semitism or as a result of political interference, or were otherwise behaving with malign intent. And I think it's important that I follow those findings that the independent inspector has made and act accordingly.
Ayub Khan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is truly a sad day for British politics, and despite all the rhetoric we have in this House, Brummies know the truth, that this is nothing but a witch hunt, and the Chief Constable is being thrown under the bus. The Home Secretary knows all too well that West Midlands Police have a reputation for working with all communities. They have never caved into community pressure. We all know this because we regularly have far-right protests and marches in our city. The police could have done a better job in terms of procedure, yes, but their reasons for banning Maccabee fans was the same from day one. We all know the unashamed racism and violence. That is the reason why they were banned, and that would have been brought to the streets of Birmingham.
Order, order, order. I am sure that the honourable gentleman is getting to his question. Ayub Khan.
The police did their job, and now they are being punished for it. So I ask the Home Secretary, is it worth throwing our Chief Constable under the bus, just to show that the words of right-wing media and Dutch officials under pressure from Amsterdam City Hall matter more than our British police?
I mean, the honourable member, I believe, used to be a barrister. You'd think that he might be more cognizant of the actual facts in this matter. I am responding to findings made by His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. That is the independent inspector of policing. It is a sad day for all those who believe that policing should occur without fear or favour. I would encourage him to read the actual letter from Sir Andy Cook, published today, in detail, and reflect on whether he believes that we as a country should be able to rely and trust all information put out by the police. He purports to speak for every Brummie in the city. I think other Brummies in this chamber know that is simply not the case. I'll tell you what every Brummie, and indeed every citizen of our great country, needs and deserves: that when the police carry out a risk assessment, that we can trust it and that we can rely on it, and that they will always be open and frank about what is really going on. That is not what happened in this case, and it is what we all should expect and deserve, whichever community we belong to. It is what we all need for our collective safety and the cohesion of our country.
Graham Stringer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's absolutely clear that by lies and conspiracy, the Chief Constable of the West Midlands created a no-go area for Jews in one of our major cities. He cannot, by whatever mechanism, continue in office, but will the Home Secretary consider prosecuting the Chief Constable for malfeasance in public office or in some other ways? We cannot let an appalling activity by a public servant continue in this way by just sacking him.
Home Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend will know it's not for me to make decisions on prosecutions, and the IOPC, I'm sure, will look and consider all of the findings made by Sir Andy Cook, and they will act, I'm sure, on that once they've had a chance to make that assessment. They are, of course, independent, and it would be inappropriate for me from this dispatch box to say any further about what either the IOPC might do or what indeed any other prosecutorial authorities do, but that is not that is not a power that the Home Secretary has.
Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Can I thank the Home Secretary, who, like me, is a local Member of Parliament, for her well-judged statement. But isn't one of the villains of this piece the Police and Crime Commissioner himself? When in government in 2010 we set up the PCCs, the aim was that they should represent our constituents to the police. Sadly, the reality has been the reverse, and nowhere more so than in the West Midlands, which is why I strongly support the government's decision to abolish the PCCs. Can we please ensure that this is not yet another policy announcement upon which the government U-turn?
Secretary.
Well, I can assure him that we will be pursuing the policy that I have set out, which is to abolish the post of Police and Crime Commissioner, and I will be returning to this House with a white paper, and we'll be making an oral statement in the not-too-distant future, setting out what we consider to be the best mechanism for oversight of policing at a local level, and a reset of where some of those powers sit, and another reconsideration of the Home Secretary's powers. So I'm sure we'll be discussing these matters in detail in the weeks to come. And may I just say, I think Sir Andy actually makes some of his own remarks in relation to the Police and Crime Commissioner, but I think it is known he was not briefed in the way that we might have expected on these matters. I'm sure he'll be setting out exactly what he knew and when he responds to Sir Andy's report.
Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement and clarity. The findings are damning. In my community, I was born and bred in Birmingham, and I am a local MP. And in my community, there is very little trust in the police. Can the Secretary of State agree with me that in an increasingly political world, it is important that in future, all Chief Constables need the skills to work in this new world, and that it is important that they are able to engage with all communities? Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend and fellow Birmingham colleague for her remarks and her question. And let me just say that is exactly why I have made the statement that I have today, because I do believe all of us in this country need to be able to trust the police when they come forward and they say they have risk assessed an upcoming event and they've come to a professional judgment as to whether an event can take place safely or not. We all need to be able to trust that they have gone about making that risk assessment in a way that is robust, consistent, in line with the law, and frankly just plain old truthful. That is not what's happened in this case. It's why I think it's been debilitating to public confidence in policing in our great city, across our region, but also across the country as well. And it's why I've set out what I've said about losing confidence in the Chief Constable, and it's why I do believe some powers for oversight of policing do need to return to the Home Secretary directly.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I think the Home Secretary is right to talk about the need for the information to be out there and to be openness. And in light of that, can the Home Secretary clarify as to whether any government officials talk to Maccabi Tel Aviv as a club or through either of the embassies to discuss the decision by the club to say that away fans would not travel even if the ban were lifted?
Secretary.
I think all of the conversations that have happened were set out by one of my officials and the policing minister when they gave evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee. There aren't any other discussions that I'm aware of, certainly not from the Home Office. I can write to him in case there were discussions in other government departments that might also have had an interest.
Tahir Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think it was right and proper to have an independent report commissioned, and the findings of which no one can really challenge because it was done independently. What we need to be cognizant of is that it is not just that the Chief Constable needs to be made the scapegoat in all of this. The Safety Advisory Group had a huge part to play in this, and there was members of that were biased, that were in there with an agenda. Some of them, I'm ashamed to say, belong to my party. Will the Home Secretary agree with me that tough action needs to be taken against the individuals that set out to influence the decision on personal basis rather than as an independent member of that Safety Advisory Group?
Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend for his remarks and his question. Let me just say to him, Sir Andy Cook will be returning to the wider questions as to how safety advisory groups function, who is on them, the role that they play and the way in which they should carry out their duties. So we will return to that part of his remarks, I'm sure, in a later session in this House when the rest of Sir Andy's report is completed and he makes his final findings on safety advisory groups. But I share with him a concern that is incumbent on us to make sure that the arrangements we have in place are capable of delivering a dispassionate, fact-based finding as to what risk an event poses, and that other political agendas are not brought into play when what we're talking about is the proper functioning of the cultural life of our country.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This has been a really dark moment for policing in the West Midlands, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement. I thank her for putting on the record her belief that the Chief Constable of the Force should go. For avoidance of doubt, I agree with her. This has always been about the police being able to fulfil their role objectively, without fear or favour. Repeatedly, the Jewish community are made to feel that they are the ones who are the problem. That cannot go on. Yes. We've seen in this instance the police have surrendered to the pressure placed on them by an Islamic community that sought to create a no-go zone for Jews within the West Midlands. This is not acceptable. So will the Home Secretary update the House on what the government is doing to flush out anti-Semitism across public institutions and across society at large? And if she hasn't got time to expand on that today, would she come back to the House and give a statement as soon as possible?
Secretary.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. Look, anti-Semitism is a terrible stain upon our country, and it's incumbent on all of us to work together to stamp it out wherever it occurs. Sir Andy's findings, of course, do not suggest that anybody at the police force level acted because they were motivated by anti-Semitism or with malign intent. But it is undoubtedly the case that some individuals who were making representations to the police may well have been motivated by anti-Semitism. I also know others made good faith representations or wanted to make good faith representations to the police just about the fear of public disorder on the night, but some of those individuals will have been motivated by anti-Semitism, and that's why it's so important that when the police are carrying out their duties, they follow the facts, and that when they make their risk assessments, they do so on the basis of facts and their professional judgment as to whether something can go safely ahead or not. And we all need to be able to trust the police when they assert what their risk assessment has told them. That has not happened here. Sir Andy will come back with further findings about the functioning of safety advisory groups, and I'm very happy to discuss those with him and others in this House, as well as wider policy measures that I believe we will need to take as a government and as a country to stamp out anti-Semitism once and for all.
Gurinder Singh Jersan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement. The West Midlands is an incredibly diverse area, and this whole episode has had a significant impact on community cohesion and competence in West Midlands Police, particularly amongst the Jewish community, but amongst all communities. I therefore add my voice to the call for the Chief Constable to resign his position forthwith, and others involved in this shameful episode should also consider their position too. The police have a duty to act without fear or favour. Engaging with selected people or organisations is always a recipe for disaster, particularly as community groups very often have their own. To manipulate their proceedings must be removed. So will the Home Secretary provide more information about the review into safety advisory groups that she's announced?
Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend. I expect to receive Sir Andy's further findings, particularly in relation to how safety advisory groups function and what changes we might need to make within the next couple of months, no later than that. And I will return to the House to enable all members to take part in a debate once those findings are out. And what I would say is I agree with him. In the end, all of us, we are all safer when we know that we can rely on the police to do their job without fear or favour. We do none of our ethnic minority communities, or indeed any minority community of any description, any favours, if we allow a suggestion to take hold that the police change their responses to things based on which community is involved. Everybody is safe when we know we can trust the police to follow the facts and do their jobs properly.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Jewish community in this country, including many, many in my constituency, feel under siege right now. And sadly, this is not an isolated example. It's just another example of where elements of the British state appear to err on the side of the aggressor in the name of community cohesion. We have another example before us, and will the Home Secretary, in her capacity as a senior member of the government with responsibility for tackling extremism, take the same robust approach to schools that are banning Jewish members of Parliament from visiting them on exactly the same community cohesion grounds? It has to stop, and a more robust approach must be taken by the government.
Home Secretary.
Thank the honourable member. Let me say to him the incident of banning of a Jewish member of Parliament from a school is obviously disgraceful, and he will know that other senior members of the government have already spoken out about this case. It is unacceptable. I hope he will see that the approach I have taken since I've been Home Secretary is to ensure that the law of our land is applied equally, without fear or favour, and in a consistent manner that gives every community across the country a sense of what they can expect from their local police, without feeling that they're in a postcode lottery, and it very much depends on the nature of your chief constable or the approach they take locally. That's exactly what I'm trying to achieve with protest powers, with wider thresholds in relation to the Public Order Act, where I've asked for an independent review by Lord Ken MacDonald, which will report soon. My intention is to make sure that every citizen of our country knows, when it comes to all matters of law and order, we are all on exactly the same equal position, and that is the thing that I think is right for all of our citizens.
David Pinto-Tuchinski.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Home Secretary's statement. The picture Sir Andy paints of serial failings in the West Midlands Police is utterly shocking, and the Home Secretary is completely right to withdraw confidence. Given the huge damage this saga has caused, what does the Home Secretary think can be done to make sure something like this never happens again?
Home Secretary.
Well, I think this matter has been of interest to all policing leaders across the country, and it is why I address the final remarks in my statement to policing leaders everywhere, because I think it's important that we learn the lessons from this event, and I hope that everybody will hear the message loud and clear. Operational independence will always be respected, but we all as a country, everyone, every citizen and every one of us as parliamentarians and as members of the government need to know that when the police make a risk assessment, we can trust that assessment and that we can rely on it.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm proud that my father was a West Midlands Police Constable for 29 years, policing football matches during some of the darkest days of English football. But the Home Secretary is clearly right that there has been a failure in the leadership of West Midlands Police over recent months. The Prime Minister rightly said that oversight for the police ultimately lies with the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that doesn't seem to have happened in this case. The Police and Crime Commissioner also has specific responsibility for improving local relationships by building confidence and restoring trust in local communities, but both confidence and trust in West Midlands Police have clearly collapsed. The Home Secretary is right to say that the Chief Constable clearly needs to go, but shouldn't the Police and Crime Commissioner also be considering his position?
Home Secretary.
Well, I would direct the honourable member to the findings Sir Andy makes about what the Police and Crime Commissioner knew, and in fact he was not kept updated, but I'm sure he will be speaking himself once he has absorbed the findings made by Sir Andy, and I'm sure he'll be setting out what he thinks on these matters and what he intends to do next, but it's not for me to put words into his mouth.
Warren de Jos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Although I am a proud Wolverhampton Wanderers football fan and as a season ticket holder regularly go to football games, for much of my life I was prevented from going to a football game and discouraged to go to a game because I was told that because I wore a turban and because of the colour of my skin I would be attacked. Can the Home Secretary please give some assurance to this House that we will never again have a situation in this country where football fans cannot go to a game because their safety cannot be guaranteed?
My honourable friend makes the point very powerfully, and that is why it is so important that all police forces always do everything they can to ensure that matters of great cultural and sporting significance in this country can go ahead safely, and that people are not prevented from going and enjoying a game just because of who they are or the faith that they have.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Among the catalogue of failure here is the news that the decision was partly made on the basis of a hallucinated AI report about an entirely fictitious football match. I wonder what assessment the Home Secretary has made on the extent to which AI is being used by police forces across the country, and if she knows of any other consequential decisions that may have been made using unverified AI. And finally, last month, after 2 months, my Select Committee, Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, finally received a response to our letter on this from, in this case, the Assistant Chief Constable, Mike O'Hara, who said, and I quote, "He was satisfied that the policing operation was conducted with communities and partners and was effective, proportionate, and maintained the city's reputation as a safe and welcoming place for everyone." What would be the Minister's message to him?
Home Secretary.
Well, I think the contents of that letter have now been superseded by the very august report and findings by Sir Andy Cook, and I would hope that everybody who has asserted that there was no problem here and everything has worked exactly as it should will now reflect on what they have said and done and give the rest of us confidence that these mistakes will not happen again. On AI, look, I think AI is an incredibly powerful tool and has a big role to play in assisting the police, particularly when it comes to sifting through evidence at speed and improving other productivity measures so that they can get on with the job of finding criminals and bringing them to justice. It's important that it's used in a way that is accurate and does not lead to misleading statements, as we've seen in this case, but also protects the validity of evidence, which ultimately has to be strong enough to hold up in a court of law. And that's why I'll be saying more in the Policing Reform White Paper in just a few weeks' time, setting out the government's approach and expectations of the rollout of AI to policing more broadly.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my Right Honourable friend Home Secretary for her statement. As a Birmingham MP, I've set out on a number of occasions in this chamber my serious concerns about both the decision and the way that it was made, and it is clear that the Chief Constable's position is untenable. I pay tribute to the many police officers who are working hard to make Birmingham safer for all its communities. But this decision will not have arisen in a vacuum. Put simply, if there was a sufficient and professional culture followed at every level and by every individual in West Midlands Police, then this decision would never have been made. So does she agree that there must be sufficient assurance now that other decisions, including those that may not have the same national profile but are important to my constituents, have not been tainted by a similar failure of process? And if the Chief Constable does resign or if he is removed, does she agree also that measures must be put in place to make sure that the highest operational standards are maintained for everyone in Birmingham?
Secretary.
Well, I thank my fellow Birmingham Member of Parliament for his comments and his question. Let me just say to him, Sir Andy, in his report today, does not make a broader finding of systemic failure. The failures that have been highlighted in terms of the approach to evidence and the way in which the risk assessment was carried out is in relation to this specific event. He didn't give us cause for concern about broader West Midlands practice, but of course, I'm sure the Police and Crime Commissioner and others, myself included, and all Birmingham MPs will want to assure themselves of the robustness of the procedures that the West Midlands Police have in place. I'm sure we'll return to these matters as there are further developments in this case.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Home Secretary for her robust statement today and the leadership that she's shown this afternoon. On the issue of community relations, could she assure me and other members that lessons will be learned out of this report, and other chief officers of other forces will look upon this as a reminder that they should be acting on behalf of the whole community that they seek to serve as chief officers? She mentions on not being able to direct the PCC in the West Midlands to dismiss the Chief Constable. But can I ask whether she is confident that there will be no conflict or conflict of interest, or the PCC won't feel conflicted in taking action in removing the Chief Constable? And of course, the Chief Constable, I'm sure, still has honour and therefore might choose to resign.
Home Secretary.
I thank the honourable gentleman. Look, he's right on community relations. Let me just reflect that I think there are many people acting in bad faith and with malign intent across our country who want to set Britain's Muslims against Britain's Jews. And I think that it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we don't allow those efforts to succeed. And in relation to the police and the approach to community relations, it's why I'm so clear that we must, all of us, whoever we are and wherever in the country we are, we must be able to rely on the police when they tell us they've come to a risk assessment and that the foundation of their risk assessment is robust and secure. If we can't trust the police on that, then I think we've lost much more than just good and effective policing, and he is right on that. And let me say to him on the position of the Police and Crime Commissioner, he will know I will not want to comment from this dispatch box on what the Police and Crime Commissioner might wish to do. That is a matter entirely for him. He will make that choice independently. I'm sure he will have to ask questions on that. There is no conflict of interest. Let me assure him of that as well, simply because I have set out a view, having commissioned a report from the independent inspector. I think it's important I come to the House and set out my view, but the Police and Crime Commissioner is unfettered in terms of how he now approaches things, and that is a matter for him, and I've made that clear to him, as I'm sure all of his own legal advice will say so as well.
Antonia Vance.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I wanted to thank my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, for her words, particularly about the dedicated frontline police officers of West Midlands Police who serve my community and hers. It is clearly time for the Chief Constable to go. It is right that we expect a high standard of community engagement across all of our communities from all of our senior public servants, and this has clearly not been met in this case, as we've explored thoroughly in this statement. But I wondered if more broadly the Home Secretary might wish to comment on whether she might urgently bring forward a community cohesion strategy that tackles extremism, anti-Semitism and sets out clear expectations of how we live together in this great country of ours.
Secretary.
Thank my honourable friend. Let me assure her all matters of community cohesion are under intense discussion across government. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, has already set up a task force to deal with anti-Semitism. I'm sure the Prime Minister and myself will have more to say in the weeks to come as to how we take a fresh approach. But it is a wider government question because, of course, the Home Office interest is on countering extremism, as it rightly should be. But, of course, the broader interest we all have on community cohesion sits across the rest of government as well, but I can assure it is a cross-government effort.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary quite rightly has lost confidence in the West Midlands Chief Constable, who kowtowed to thugs, abandoned the Jewish community and blamed Jewish fans. Now the question is to the Home Secretary, if the Police and Crime Commissioner fails to fire this Chief Constable, will she still have confidence in that Commissioner? And secondly, will she make the new legislation retrospective in order to ensure that action is delivered?
Secretary.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman will know that retrospectivity is not something we generally do in our legal system, and to take such a step would be a very new innovation here, but he should wait for the full proposals that I will publish in the policing reform white paper. And look, let me say to him that the next decision, if a further decision is made, is for the Police and Crime Commissioner. It would be completely wrong for me to try to influence that or comment on that or get ahead of that from this dispatch box here today. The Police and Crime Commissioner has the powers under the 2011 Act, as we discussed earlier in this session. It will be for him to reflect on whether he wishes to use his powers.
Johnny Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This sorry saga with the West Midlands Police, I'm afraid, reveals a very serious story about public life in Britain, because it's become clear that employees within our public institutions do not recognise, do not understand, or possibly do not care about anti-Semitism in the police, in our local government, in our universities, political parties and elsewhere. And they're all too willing to accept their claims, the claims of anti-Semites, that their real objection is to the Israeli government at face value. They are unwitting agents of an agenda from the far left, the far right and Islamists. Anti-Semitism is rampant and unrelenting. Will the Home Secretary recognise the urgency of action and consider bringing forward a cross-departmental extremism strategy to address ideological anti-Semitism and other forms of extremism?
Well, I thank my honourable friend and her point about the stain of anti-Semitism in our country and the breadth and depth of how anti-Semitism is presenting itself in our country. Her points are well made and they are problems that I am well aware of and working hard to try to resolve. There is a cross-government effort underway. We'll have more to say in due course. But let me assure her that from the perspective I take as Home Secretary, it is to make sure that our legal system and our law and order, the overall system of policing in our country is robust enough to be able to withstand attempts to frustrate or to improperly influence that system. It's important to remember Sir Andy Cook did not find that anti-Semitism was a motivating factor for the police officers who made these decisions in this case, nor were they subject to improper political interference or acting with malign intent. But I do accept the broader point that she has raised, and I just reassure her that that is something that we are working very carefully on.
Sir Alec Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And building on the comments from my right honourable friend for Hertsmere, my Jewish community have felt under siege for a decade now. And one thing that is worth paying tribute to is that the previous leader of the opposition, the now Prime Minister, drove out of their party the people who had given anti-Semitism a safe space. But let's not be under an illusion, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are many people who feel they still have that safe space for anti-Semitism. And whether it be in our universities, where huge numbers of students believe that they can, without impunity, hassle Jewish students, whether it be in our hospitals, as outlined in the Lord Mayor and Dame Penny Mordaunt report, which I know the Secretary of State is trying to address, that anti-Semitism is blatant and allowed to get away with. But we must call it out at all levels. And I will call out right now, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the deputy leader of the Green Party, who I am ashamed to say is a Leeds City councillor, drove out into hiding the Jewish priest of the University of Leeds, and he is still in hiding. Shame. And they must be called out. So may I ask the Home Secretary that she uses every effort of her office across government to make sure that where anti-Semitism is still given a safe space, where it is still not being addressed, that they call out the leaders of those institutions and look at what action may be taken. This is another watershed moment, as odd as that sounds, but this time something really has to be done.
Home Secretary.
Well, let me reassure the honourable gentleman the government is taking action across a range of different departments in the education sector, in health, and also myself as Home Secretary to do everything we can to drive out anti-Semitism in every way that it presents itself, and particularly cognisant of the impact on our institutions and how some of our democratic underpinnings for how our society works can be overcome and frustrated and thwarted by anti-Semites seeking to undermine the very basis on which we run our country. Let me assure him every effort is being made, and I would just also reflect that, you know, as someone who has suffered racism and discrimination because of my own faith and my own race background, I think I can speak for most ethnic minority people in the view that we generally take of these matters, which is that none of us are safe until all of us are safe. There has to be solidarity across our country for every one of our communities. It is the collective whole that makes this country great.
Joe White. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, I've been following this very closely. Safety advisory groups from Birmingham and Leicester last autumn banned or scaled down Diwali events. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that councillors should be removed from SAGs? Should there also be greater transparency to ensure that there is no reliance on confirmation bias, which is intertwined, in my view, with the risk of predetermination that local authorities have a duty to prevent when carrying out their judicial duties? Home Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the work that she and other members of the Home Affairs Select Committee have done on this and other matters. And let me just say, because there are question marks over the way that safety advisory groups function, and I know, as she remarks, there have been other incidents of controversial decisions where people have had questions about how those decisions came to be made. That is the reason why I asked Sir Andy to look broader at the functioning of safety advisory groups and to come to a view on how they should be made up and the transparency that should be required of them and the process by which they should make their decisions. I think it's a little early to now make determinations about whether any politician should be represented on those groups. I think if the system was to work well, local politicians can bring a local perspective with the knowledge that only they have. But of course, if that then turns into an improper attempt to force their own political agenda, that cannot be tolerated. I hope that when Sir Andy makes some findings on these matters, we'll be able to return to whether policy or legislative change is needed.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome both the tone and content of the Home Secretary's statement today. She'll be well aware that when the draw was made, that meant that Maccabee were going to be visiting Villa Park, there were attempts by extremist elements in the community to prevent the fixture taking place at all. When that failed, they moved on then to try and get fans banned because the club comes from Israel and the fans are Jewish. I've been to Villa Park on multiple occasions. It's perfectly possible for those fans to have been escorted by coach from the airport right outside the ground and for them to be escorted away from the ground immediately afterwards. It was very clear that Aston Villa fans were not going to attack the fans of Maccabee, but extremist elements within the community were going to. It is clear then that the police concocted evidence to support that case. And the reality is, whilst I completely agree with her about the Chief Constable, the senior leadership of West Midlands Police also have questions to answer about who fabricated that evidence, was it done under orders, and if the Chief Constable should go, surely they should go as well.
Secretary.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his remarks. Let me tell him, I know Villa Park very well because until the last general election, the club fell within my constituency boundary. And that is why, after the decision was made, the government and myself, through my officials, did seek to ask West Midlands Police whether there were other ways in which the match could be policed so as to enable it to go ahead, because we were very clear that banning the fans is a very extreme act to take, and in the general run of things, we should want cultural events in our country to take place. So I do recognise the picture that he paints. The findings are damning, as I know many honourable members here have remarked already. Just let me say to him on the wider issue of other officers, I think in the end, the reason I've made the remarks I have about the Chief Constable today is he is the individual who leads the force. It's happened on his watch. It's for him to have set the proper culture where all of these risk assessments were done properly and where confirmation bias could not have taken hold. And it is the Chief Constable who, of course, made assertions and gave evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee in the way that he did. It's now for him to reflect on that. He may have things to say himself in the coming days, and it's for the Police and Crime Commissioner, I think, now to consider what further actions he might wish to take, including his broader responsibilities to make sure that the force is functioning as it should.
Sean Woodcock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I say, as an alumni of the University of Birmingham, former resident of Selyoke, I found this whole saga pretty much astonishing from the start. We've had mistake after mistake, evidence that turns out to have been made up. Meanwhile, the bond of trust with our Jewish community that has already been under increasing pressure has been caused further damage. Now, mistakes do get made, but when they are this serious and include presenting falsified evidence to a committee of this House, somebody has to take responsibility. And so I would echo the calls that have been made by members across this House for the Chief Constable to do the decent thing and to resign and to do it today.
Secretary.
I thank my honourable friend. I've set out what I think in my statement today. Others will now need to reflect on their positions and what further steps they might take. Let me just agree with him, though, that the findings of Sir Andy Cook's report are damning and devastating, and the bond of trust between a community and the police, once it breaks for one community, it does break for every community, and that is why these findings are so serious, and that is why I've said what I've had to say about confidence in the Chief Constable today.
Sir Julian Lewis.
If I understand the presentation of Sir Andy's independent report by the Home Secretary correctly, it says that the police knew that the visiting fans were not likely to attack the home community. Does it make clear whether or not they thought that the home community was likely to attack the visiting fans? Because if they thought that and then inverted reality to blame the visiting fans, that surely puts the Chief Constable in an absolutely impossible position.
The findings in Sir Andy Cook's report are about an overstating of the risk posed by the travelling fans and an understatement of the risk posed to those fans by others in the local community. So it isn't a case of one thing being presented as fact and the other not. There's an overstatement and an understatement that has taken place, and the effect of that has been to present a risk assessment that was imbalanced, wholly skewed in one direction, and did not adequately deal with all of the risks that were posed. I believe one of the reasons suggested for why the possible attack from local individuals against the travelling fans was about community relations. It's why what I said in my statement I stand by. Community relations in this country are not served by overstatements and understatements and a hiding of the full picture in order to keep things calm. The truth is what helps us all stay safe, and that is what they should have done in this case.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I genuinely welcome the content of the Home Secretary's statement today and her answers to other members too. It's quite clear that the Chief Constable of the West Midlands position is just no longer tenable, but I accept her reasoning for why she can't remove him today, and I am pleased that she will reintroduce that power in the near future. It is a national scandal that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were not able to attend a football match in the UK's second city for what we now know were totally fabricated reasons. What does the Home Secretary say to those? How can she reassure Israeli fans of any sport that this won't happen to them again and that the law will be applied equally without fear or favour?
I think the message needs to go loud and clear to everyone that our expectation is that every police force, when making a decision on any cultural or football or other sporting event in our country, has to do so by following the facts, acting without fear or favour, and if they do their job properly, then we will always be able to put on events, police them safely, and allow people in our country and from abroad enjoy the great spectacle of football or pop concerts or other things as well. They are important parts of how we function as a country, and they can only carry on being that if the police do their job properly.
Nick Timothy.
Speaker, can the Home Secretary confirm that the Prime Minister was also told that a ban was likely in advance of the announcement? The Home Office and Number 10 were in touch according to the official documents. Was she told of the intelligence of the 5th of September that armed Islamists intended to attack the Israelis? And on the point about operational independence, I do worry she's overstating things. It is obviously wrong for politicians to tell police officers who to investigate or arrest, but for public order situations, there's often a role for the Home Secretary when the planning work is underway before the operation. That's recognised in law, and it's why the Prime Minister himself has called for particular policing decisions in public order situations in advance. So can she confirm, when she was told that the police would seek a ban on away fans, she didn't ask to see the intelligence to justify the ban? Did she test the logic? Is it really true that she did nothing at all?
Home Secretary.
Well, let me say to the honourable gentleman, he's presenting a particular picture of operational independence, which he knows is a difficult line to tread for all Home Secretaries and something that is guarded very closely by police. But it would have been wholly inappropriate for me to try and carry out either my own risk assessment and if I was, as I was subsequently able to do once a decision was made challenging West Midlands Police on the basis on which those decisions, I was dependent on what they would have been telling, I would have been dependent on what they would have been telling me in the first place. I was not told that they would seek a ban on visiting vans. I was told that it was that all options were on the table, so it was one of the things that was being considered, but I was not told that it was going to be done. So I would refer him to Sir Andy's letter and the final page in the first paragraph of that letter, which sets out what actually happened. And I absolutely refute any suggestion that I was told definitively on the 8th of October in the way that the Chief Constable has suggested happened. That did not happen. Let me say to him on contact between the Home Office and number 10, that would have happened in the usual way, but the first any of us were aware of the decision being brought forward, being made earlier than anticipated, and that a ban was going to be pursued was on the 16th of October. Sorry. And I was not given any intelligence about any armed or planned armed attacks by local people. That was never put to me.
Paul Carla.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, I asked Chief Constable Guildford on 2 occasions whether AI was used in the preparation of the police report, and he denied it both times. So I'm pleased the truth has emerged and he's now considering his position. However, can I press the Home Secretary on the use of AI? I hear what she said, but whilst we await the Home Office's guidance, can she issue preliminary instructions to Chief Constables asking them not to use AI in such circumstances?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman, and particularly for his assiduous work on the Home Affairs Select Committee in relation to the hearings on this matter. Look, I would hope all police leaders today have heard loud and clear the issue in relation to AI. I don't think any of them would want to fall foul of an AI hallucination. I think that at best that is a deeply embarrassing finding, but actually is pretty damning of the overall approach taken in this case, and I'm sure all police chiefs will want to make sure they don't come into the same position. The Home Office will set out our broader vision for how AI should be used by policing, because it clearly does have a role to play, but the way in which they should hold themselves to account and the regulations by which the use of AI should be monitored, so we can all have confidence that it's being used appropriately.
Iqbal Mahmood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Home Secretary for her statement, and any procedural failings by our police force or any public authorities must be investigated and corrected and prevented. The report or the letter by Sir Andy Cook does mention that certain risks were overstated and understated, and that should be balanced. But the statements in this House, the incidents in Amsterdam, were completely fabricated, are also statements that are fabricated. He does acknowledge there's evidence that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans targeted Muslims and pro-Palestinians in Amsterdam. A report by Kick It Out Israel identified 118 incidents of racist chanting by Maccabi Tel Aviv fans during 2024 and 2025, the highest for any club in the Israeli Premier League. UEFA fined Maccabi Tel Aviv €20,000 and imposed a suspended away ban fan for their match against...
Order. This question... Sit down, please, when I'm stood up. This question needs to be a question to the Home Secretary. Sorry. Iqbal Mahmood.
My apologies, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's open season on Islamophobia in this room, and I'm completely against any kind of racism, and anti-Semitism must be quashed, but so should Islamophobia. Will the Home Secretary confirm that there is no reference to anti-Semitic decision-making by the police in Sir Andy Cook's report, and there's no mention of any Islamist influence, because I have the report in front of me, in his report?
Home Secretary.
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman, and indeed all members of the House, is we should be led by the findings of the independent inspector. He's been very clear on where evidence was overstated. He's been very clear about where it was understated. He said that he believes confirmation bias was at work, and there are very significant failings of West Midlands Police in this matter, and that is why I have said what I have had to say in my statement today. Let me just say more broadly to him and to everybody else, I just reiterate reiterate the point. There are people in this country who want to set our minority communities against one another. Every member of this House should want to police that boundary and make sure that does not take hold in our country. But we can all only be confident that we are all subject to the same law across wherever we are in this country if we can trust that the police will apply themselves without fear or favour. It is in everyone's interest to make sure that these issues are dealt with properly, and every citizen deserves the same sort of response from the police, that when they tell us something is true, we can believe them. That's what's not happened in this case, and that's what needs to happen in the future.
And point of order, Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I seek your guidance on whether it is appropriate for members of this House to call into question the intentions of members when asking questions relating to this issue in the Home Secretary and accusing us all of peddling Islamophobia.
Should withdraw it.
Can I remind all members to be careful of their language, to be moderate in their language, and treat this chamber and members within this chamber with respect, and then we can't go far wrong. Whilst it's not a point of order, it is a matter for the chair, and I thank the honourable gentleman for raising that. That concludes the statement. Order, order. I will now announce the results of today's deferred division on the Draft Public Order Act 2023, interference with use of operation of key national infrastructure regulations 2025. Order, order. Order.